What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we're going to do our first analysis of a Final Fantasy TCG card. We do analysis all the time for Keyforge cards and Transformers cards, etc, etc. But we've not done Final Fantasy yet. I don't think we're quite at the stage where I'm going to be able to do a video on every new card revealed, but with Opus 9 coming up soon, I'm certainly going to start doing a whole bunch more. And we're going to start off today talking about Vayne because no one seems to be able to decide if this card is actually good or not, and I thought, right, well, that sounds like a pretty good subject for a video. So on the face of it, it's a 5-cost, 9,000 power card, which is somewhere in the region of average. It's a Ford, it's an ice, and it's got one skill. All the Fords your opponent controls gain at the end of your turn. If you don't pay one, break this Ford. Now, on the face of it, this seems over the top, because it basically means that every single Ford your opponent controls is going to get broken unless you pay one extra cost. So if we take something like Viking, sees quite a lot of play in water decks, 3-cost Ford, when it enters a field you draw a card, when it leaves a field you draw a card. It's a free cost. Except, it's a free cost to get it out, but then when Vayne's down, it becomes essentially a 4-cost, then essentially a 5-cost. Because every time it gets to the end of your turn, your opponent has to pay one just to keep the Fords they've already got and they've already paid. Otherwise, you got to break it, which is going to lead to your opponent having to make some interesting choices. Do I save some of my CP for my opponent's turn for some counterplays? Do I save it for these characters, use it for these characters in my hand, or that might be coming in my hand soon? Or do I use it to just keep the Fords I've already got on the field? It seems like it could be a real game-breaking card, especially if you can catch your opponent in a situation where they've got too many Fords for all of their backups, etc, etc, and you can actually force them just to lose a whole bunch of their Fords, and potentially they don't have enough cards in hand, they don't have enough backups on the field, and all of a sudden there's not a huge amount that they can do. And there are times here where playing this card with your opponent's field as it is going to lead them to basically lose the game. On the face of it, it seems fairly game-breaking. And yes, admittedly, I'm newer to the game than a bunch of people, but come on, it looks amazing. But as a whole bunch of people have pointed out, this isn't exactly some kind of perfect card that's going to make every ice deck indestructible. Now, there are some things that you can do to try and really increase the chances of this really going off. So, this was revealed on the official website, and one of the things they pointed out, though I'm sure a lot of other people would get there pretty gosh darn quickly, if you can dull and freeze your opponent's Fords or backups, this gets even better. So let's take a card like Celeste. When Celeste enters the field, choose one character, freeze it. When she deals damage to your opponent, choose one dull Ford they control, deal it 4,000 damage. And Runic is a special skill, choose one summon, cancel its effect, activate Celeste. So it can freeze characters. Ultimacia, when Ultimacia enters the field, select one of the 3 following actions. If you've received 6 points of damage, select up to 2 of the 3. Choose up to 2 characters and dull them. Freeze all the Fords your opponent controls. Freeze all the backups your opponent controls. Now, there are some which are a bit less specific. So Genesis, for instance, when it enters the field, you choose one Ford your opponent controls, dull it and freeze it, but it doesn't do anything to backups. But the point here very simply is, if your opponent has dulled or frozen backups, they're not going to be able to use them to pay the cost it's going to take to keep the Fords on the field, which is going to make this way better. Similarly, if you freeze and dull the Fords, well, they can still use the backups to save them, but now you're using your backups to save a Ford that is dull and frozen and isn't going to be useful right this second. And if you build a deck this way, and let's face it, right, ice decks are pretty good at dulling and freezing. There's a lot of them that do. So you can now take advantage of this and make your opponent either lose all of their forwards, or a bunch of them, or have to go to an almost disproportionate amount of effort to keep their forwards on the field. Now, it all sounds a bit too good to be true, and as a bunch of people pointed out, it may very well be. Because you see, this card has no protection. It is just a very simple, straightforward ability and there's nothing else about the card. And one of the most played cards at the moment, the fourth most popular card, is Diablos. According to ffdex.com, it is featured in 23% of the decks that they're recording in tournaments. It's huge. It's everywhere. And the problem with Diablos is it's a 5-cost summons. Select up to 2 of the following 4 actions. Choose one forward of cost 5 or more, break it. Yeah, that's a bit of a pain. Also, it can activate all the forwards you control or activate all the backups you control. Which means that, first of all, you're going to be breaking Vayne. That's a bit of an issue for the Vayne player. And secondly, you're going to be activating all the backups you control. That means you're going to have far more backups, and that means that paying the cost for the forwards is going to become significantly easier. And a bunch of people have pointed out that Diablos is a huge problem for Vayne, and clearly it is a huge problem for Vayne, because taking out Vayne instantly, just removing it, bearing in mind there's no protection built into the card to stop this, while then activating all of your backups, yeah, that's pretty gosh darn good. And like I've said, it's played in 23% of tournament decks at the moment. That's a lot. But it's only about a quarter. There's still a bunch of decks that don't play it. And the thing with trading card games generally is you might have some kind of silver bullet answer, but can you draw into it at the right time? Because one of the things that we can see about ice decks is that quite a few of them play quite a bit of hand disruption. I showed you Genesis earlier, but one of the things that Genesis can do, when it deals damage to your opponent, they discard a card from their hand. Everyone loves the Opus 7 Sephiroth. That sees a lot of play in ice decks. And when it enters the field, your opponent discards 2 cards from their hand. That sounds pretty gosh darn nice. We see Edward played as a backup in ice decks. When it enters a field, your opponent discards 1 card from his or her hand. So maybe if you can pair this with enough hand disruption, you can get your opponent to the point where they've got the cards in their deck, and they may have even had them in their hand, to deal with Vayne. But by the time Vayne hits the field, you've disrupted their hand so much that, yeah, we can't actually get this working, boo, hiss, etc. But then again, maybe your opponent can remove it. And the thing is, if they do remove it, then you've just wasted your 5 cost. Because the thing is, there are plenty of cards. Again, let's go back to Genesis. When it enters the field, you choose 1 forward your opponent controls, dull it and freeze it. So that means that you are going to get some benefit out of it, because when it hits the field, you get it, unless your opponent's got somewhere to stop it. Whereas Vayne here, it only does something at the end of your turn. It can be kinda slow. And that's the big knock on the card as a whole. If it gets removed, there's just too much you've wasted, and it doesn't do enough outside of that. And I've talked a lot about Diablos in the video, for good reason, incidentally. But then again, we've always got cards like Summoner. It's an ice backup, and you can pay 1 ice to put Summoner into the break zone, choose a summon, cancel its effect. So all of a sudden, Diablos comes in as a silver bullet to Vayne, but no. Now Summoner goes and cancels it. The thing about Vayne is, nobody seems to be able to figure out if this is a good card or not. And that's not exactly some weird situation to be in when we're in a trading card game. Because the fact of the matter is, nobody ever knows anything. We can all make predictions as to what we think is good and what isn't, but no one really knows until we start playing, until we start testing. We've not seen every card from Opus 9 yet. We don't know what decks are going to be good when Opus 9 is legal for tournament play. And for that reason, we don't know whether this is going to be good. It certainly has a very powerful effect. And if your opponent goes aggressive in the opening and is operating with a small hand size and has too many forwards out, yeah, maybe you can drop this and completely screw them over. And maybe the second you put it down, your opponent plays a Diablos and it's a moot point anyway. Or maybe it falls somewhere in between. Maybe it's not some amazing all-encompassing card that's going to wreck the format. And maybe it's not an absolute trash blank card because too many people are playing Diablos. Although again, it's only a quarter of people in tournaments. Then again, only a quarter might be a silly phrase in and of itself. I remain optimistic. I'm a fan of Ice. I'm loving Ice decks at the moment. This seems like the kind of thing I'm going to be trying to pop one of into most of my Ice decks in the hope that I can drop it in some games and get a win. Because remember, you don't have to win every game in a tournament with every card. Just winning a game or two or turning a game or two can make it worth putting one card in your deck. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. No one seems to be able to figure out if this is good or not, but that's why we build decks and play games. I, for one, am excited to find out the answer. I would, however, like you to start the conversation all over again with me in the comment section. Tell me what you think about this card, trash or treasure, go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, where we talk about games like Final Fantasy, and we've just started talking Chrono Clash and a whole bunch of others. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching Wassy Plays.